Well, genetic drift is one of the four factors that create the patterning of alleles in the gene pool. So it's the factor under which we group a whole series of processes that are really random. Let's say that you're the only person in the population with blue eyes, and you happen to fall off a cliff before you have any kids. Okay, then that could be an example where, unless there are a lot of people who have recessive alleles for blue eyes in the population, where blue eyes disappear from the population. So it's not something that's due to selection. It isn't something that's being favored by the environment. It's just a chance event that changes the frequency of alleles in the descendant population. So one example is when humans left Africa, modern humans, when our ancestors left Africa, maybe 60,000 years ago, maybe before that. They did not, it was probably a very small population that left, and it didn't represent all of the variation that was present in Africa at that time. So the descendants of the people who didn't leave Africa today have a great many genetic variants that are not represented outside of Africa. So anytime we're looking at a small population that's tended to be isolated on an island or be perhaps isolated by marriage rules or whatever, often we find genetic variants in that population that are not present in the larger population of the entire continent or subcontinent. Genetic mutation is another one of the fundamental forces that shape the composition of the gene pool of a population or of a species. And what a mutation is again, it's a random change in the sequence of bases in the DNA that can be a silent mutation that has no effect on the protein that's formed, or it can be a mutation that actually changes the protein that gene can make in some fundamental way. And so there are mutations that either are in parts of the genome that don't do anything, that are called neutral aspects of the genome, or there can be mutations in genes that actually are important in contributing to your growth and development or your bodily processes. A mutation that affects us but doesn't kill us can also affect our life course, how many children we can have, and how successful we can be in our lives in many ways, how we can fit in with the rest of society. So what happened when people moved out of Africa? And they did this more than once. But we do know that Neanderthals, who may have stemmed from a population that left Africa perhaps 700 or 600 to 800,000 years ago, somewhere in there, that they developed lighter skin. That is, they, like many species, think of white rabbits, have undergone a mutation that has removed their pigmentation. It's a condition we call albinism, where you do get lighter pigmentation in many animal species. That happens every once in a while. In humans, this is a mutation that happens over and over again, where the pigmentation isn't quite so dark in an offspring of perhaps a couple of individuals who have darker pigmentation. They may have a lighter skinned offspring. And if they still were in the tropics, that lighter skinned offspring might have some problems. But you take them and move them to Europe, and it becomes advantageous to have lighter skin. That you're going to grow taller and straighter, and bones are going to form better, and so on. So that's a case where a mutation that may happen over and over again in human evolution suddenly becomes advantageous. And so because it becomes advantageous, this random event, this random change, gets spread through the population. And what we know is that happened again when modern humans' ancestors left Africa, sometime before 60,000. And they too left Africa with probably very African traits and eventually developed lighter skin and lighter pigmentation. That is, mutations that happen, crop up every once in a while, were suddenly advantageous. So they spread through the population rather than being weeded out as the other, as would have happened had they stayed in the tropics.